Hello and welcome to Objective-C Programming. This is lecture number 5. In this lecture, we're going to see a few things about Cocoa that makes it so easy to use and so useful. One of those things we already touched in the last lecture, and that thing is an outlet or outlets. And we already kind of know what it is because it's an obvious thing, but we're going to see it deeply in this one. We're also going to get to know what targets and actions are, although just like in the previous lecture, we did touch this thing and we did use it. And one of the most important parts of this lecture is delegates. And this is not only a thing to use, it's also a concept to understand. And in the last lecture, when we were overviewing the design patterns that we use today and design patterns that are really useful in modern Objective-C programming, one of those things was delegating actions. And we're going to see this in much more detail and example and in this lecture. So here's the new thing about the course now. Since this is more of an experimental course and we're trying new things, we're trying to make this as useful for you and as easy as possible, we decided to split every lecture into modules. And this is just what it says. It's just splitting one long video into few shorter videos. And each video will be called a module, and each module will be about a specific part of the lecture. This is done so that you can go ahead and look and watch the lectures in more personalized way, because let's say you understood one part really well and didn't understand the other part really well, unlike your partner. And instead of rewinding and looking for the part you didn't understand, you now have those modules and you know exactly what each module is about, and you can make it more personalized, more useful. So you only watch whatever you need to watch. So this is the first module. In this module, we're going to just recap and remember what we were working in the last lecture. We created a simple application, a window application that has 2 buttons, and we were generating the random number and seeding the random generator with the current time. We had a way of connecting those buttons from the interface to the code. And if you don't remember that, just go ahead and watch lecture 4. But that was easy. You probably remember, because we were connecting dots. We were making lines between a button and the code. So we made 2 things. First connection was we made sort of a pointer to the object in the interface. We had a label, and that label was there to represent, to show the random number we generated. And that label needed to be referenced from the code somehow. So we created a thing called outlet. Outlet is a way of referencing to the thing in our interface. We also made another type of connection. We had a button. We actually had 2 buttons. And we wanted to do something in the code when a user presses the button, when the user clicks the button. So we made sort of an inverse of an outlet, but not really, just a different thing. And we called it an action, or IB action, and IB stands for interface builder. So we created methods just like any other method in our code, but we said that method will be in an IB action. And our compiler understood this as, okay, this method will be executed when something in the interface happens, when some event from the interface happens. And then we connected the lines and we said, well, this button should run this method. And we were able to do that because that method was marked as an IB action. So first things first, this is what we did. We had a button, we actually had another outlet for the button because you remember we wanted to make the generate button disabled by default. So when you run the application, it's disabled, you cannot generate numbers. And we enable it by pressing seed. Seed will seed the random generator with the current time and make the generate button enabled. So because we wanted to do something to the button, so because we wanted to act from the code to the view, to the button, we needed to create an outlet for that button. And we said IB outlet, NS button, gen button. And we created this new variable that is going to be referencing our button. For seed, we didn't need to do that because we don't change this button from the code. We only react to the button in the code. So when we click seed, we do something in the code, but we don't touch the button itself. That's why we only have an IB action for the seed. We don't have an outlet. And we have an outlet for the label. So what is an outlet? You probably understood the idea, but the formal definition is an outlet is some instance variable that identifies an object. And we usually mean by outlet and by object some object that we see or have somehow in the interface builder, in our graphical interface. Not all the objects in the interface are visible, so not all the objects are like buttons or labels. Some of them represent something like media player, and it's not the player with the buttons that you touch, it's just a thing that will play your files. But it's still an object, and it's still, if you want to reference it, needs to be connected to an outlet. So the idea is there. You have a view and you connect it to the model. You connect it to your code by having an outlet. And you actually do it visually. You can do it visually, but you can also do it programmatically. When you have, let's say, a button, and you want to do something in the code when something in the interface happens, in this example, when button is clicked, then we get to the notion of a target and an action. And it's super simple. If you have a button, then you have some method in some object that reacts to this button. We had the seed method in our object. So this object is the target. This is what gets to run the action. And the action is the method, the selector we are asking the target to run. So if we have a button, then the seed in this example is the name of the method we're running, and this is the action. The seed is the action. And the target of that action is, we can say the target of that button is the object that we wrote. So this is just a notion, this is more of a notation, and when we say what is the target for this button, then we mean what is the object that has the method that reacts to some action on this button. And what is the action? Well, this is whatever we decided to run when we click the button. Okay, to better understand how this whole thing works, we should take a look at how we get to the NS button. And you know that we only work with those objects that are ultimately inherited from NS object. And I say ultimately because it's not like NS button inherited directly from NS object. NS button inherits from NS control, another subclass of NS object. But again, it's not a direct subclass. The NS control is a generic control. And all those things that we have on the screen, like buttons, text fields, sliders, anything that you can basically call a controller on the view is inherited from NS control. And that NS control is inherited from NS view. And NS view is another generic object, generic class that represents something that appears in our window. And that could be anything visually on our window. And the window itself and NS view inherited from NS responder. And NS responder is a generic class that represents and has all those methods that can handle different events. And that ultimately, for the last, inherit from NS object. And NS object is super generic object that only has those things that are about having memory, initializing the object, and stuff like that. All right, so this is the recap. This is module 1. See you in module 2. Welcome back. This is module 2 of lecture 5. This is the part where we're going to create a simple but quite cool application. And we call this module Let's Make Some Noise. So let's go to Xcode and create a new project for this. Just a simple Cocoa application, nothing new here. And we call it Say It, something like that. So you remember in lecture 2 we created a simple web browser, and it didn't take much time. It took a few minutes. We were able to run a simple web browser within a few minutes. That was because we had this awesome framework called WebKit, and we have it provided for us. And in the next lectures, we were creating all those applications with windows like this, and buttons and text fields, and we didn't care about how they work, we just had them. This is because we have another awesome framework called AppKit, and the Cocoa API to work with that AppKit. As I said in one of previous lectures, we have a lot of frameworks that are just awesome, and we can get more from somewhere. We can create our own frameworks and reuse them in future. One of the cool things that we can find in this operating system is a speech synthesizer. This operating system, the OS X, tries to be accessible by different people, including people with disabilities. Although speech synthesizing is just fun, you can make your computer say different things, it's actually a really useful tool for people with vision impairment, for blind people, for people who don't see really well, for old people who want to read stuff from the internet or letters from their grandchildren, but not able to read small letters really well. So it's a nice thing of a computer to do if it can read something off the screen for the people in a nice English voice and some other languages as well. So this thing is accessible by developers, and I want to make a simple application that will read whatever I write. So for this I need, first of all, a text field. I have it right here. Just drag it, make it bigger, and I also want 2 buttons. I want one button right here, and I want another button right here. So this one will be called speak, and this will be called stop. And you kind of can guess what they do. Okay, so you remember we were creating those outlets in the previous lecture, and we were writing them by hand. IB outlet, NS button, speak button, something like this. And it's fine, but there's even easier way. So let's make it just nicer like this. Right here in the top right corner, you have different buttons to make your interface different. So you can make those go away. The second button here shows up the assistant editor. An assistant editor is basically another window of code that is connected to the thing that you have on the left. So if I have my main application here on the left, we are going to see the header file for that application. And this is really useful because there is an easier way to create outlets and actions. I have this text field, and I want to create an outlet for that text field so that I can use this text field from my code. I can reference it somehow. So I want to create the variable. And it's really easy from here. If we have the assistant editor open, I control click on my text field and drag it here. And I see this little window. It allows me to create an outlet. So I will say this is text field and just hit connect. Boom, I have a property. And this is even better than what we did by hand last time. By hand, we just created an IB outlet, a single variable. This created a property. And you probably remember this from previous lectures. A property is something that we can synthesize and get getters and setters automatically. So if I go back to my main file, I can see I have now this synthesized. The text field is now synthesized, and I can access this text field and I can get and set stuff from that text field. What if I want to make an action? It's the same way. I want to make an action for the speak button. I control click the speak button, drag it here, but now I have to select action. And I just call this action somehow. This will be the name of the method. And I hit connect. So now I have this action. So this not only connects the action to the view, but creates the action in the code, something that we did by hand last time. So I'm going to do the same for the stop, and we'll call it, oops, yes, this is an action, and I call it stop it. Now I have those two actions. Make it nicer like this. So now if I go to my main file, I even have empty methods right here in the implementation. So what do I need to have for this speech synthesizer? Well, first of all, I need to create it. So in my interface, I have to define it first. And we didn't have any variables yet, so I had to add those brackets. And I'm going to create an speech synthesizer and call it speech synth. So again, this is just a pointer. It's not an object. So if we go back to our main file, we can see we have this command by default. It says insert code here to initialize your application. And this is basically an init for your application. This is where stuff is going to run when your application starts. So this is a good place to put our line of code to create the speech synthesizer. So I have this speech synth, and just like we did with another objects, I want to make it a new object and a speech synthesizer alloc. And then I want to initialize it, but I can actually initialize it with some voice. So I make it init with voice and make it nil because I want to have a default voice now. And in the next module, we're going to actually change the voice. Okay, that's it. We can use it now. So all I want to do now is when we hit say, and we have this method here, I want to read it. I want the synthesizer to read it out loud. So I can reference the speech synth, and it has a method called start speaking with string, start speaking string, and it accepts an NS string, and I can just write something here like hello, but I want to get the stuff from our text field, and I have a text field because I created an outlet here, remember? So I can reference text field here. I have a text field and I can get the string value of that text field. Here's an error. Since we created it by automatically, it actually uses this syntax. So the getter and setter are with underscore. So this, we're going to get the string value of the text field, and for the stop, I want to just speech synth stop speaking right there. And I hopefully have no issues. I run this application and see what happens. Okay, let's try it with Gangnam Style, of course.
Gangnam Style.
That works. You hopefully heard my speakers are not too loud.
Gangnam Style.
And let's see if stop works.
Gangnam.
That works too. So this was easy. You have to admit this was easy. And this module was just to show you how you can create outlets and actions easier and faster. And let's go on to the next module and actually see what delegates are. Hello and welcome back to the module 3. Here's the thing. I have my application and I have the speech synthesizer, and as you can see from here, this is just another object. We created an object, we initialize here, and we use it. And that object does something for us. So here we pass a string to that object, and that object make it so it is readable, and it reads the string. Our application doesn't know anything about that object. I mean, that our application does not do that. It does not read the text. It just asks another object. And this is fine. This is what you get. But the problem is, at some point, I want to do something that that object does, or I want to know something that that object knows. And one of the most obvious things in our example is I want in my application to do something when the speech synthesizer stops, when it's done speaking. And it sounds like a trivial task, but it's not. I don't know how to make it. I can check if it stopped speaking or if it's speaking or not. So I can just make a timer and check every second. Are you done speaking? And it will answer no. And then, are you done speaking? No. Are you done speaking? Yes. Now I kind of know that it's done speaking, but I spend a lot of resources doing it. This was kind of stupid. The idea of delegation is for scenarios like this. I want the speech synthesizer to give me the ability to do something when speech synthesizer, in this example, stops speaking. So I want speech synthesizer to delegate an action to me, to my application, so that I can do and I can understand when it's done. I can do something on behalf of speech synthesizer, and the speech synthesizer delegates something to me. So this is kind of foggy, so let's just see it in example. I want to do exactly what I said. I want to understand, I want to get and do something when the speech synthesizer stopped speaking. So first thing to do is I have to make my application compatible with the delegate. I want to make my application to be able to adopt those methods that make it a delegate of speech synthesizer. So here in my header file, I am creating my class. I first of all need to specify the protocol I'm trying to adopt. And this protocol would be the delegate of NS speech synthesizer. In other words, I am saying my class that I created in this example will be the same and will be compatible with the delegate of speech synthesizer, so that I can be called a delegate. To do that, I'll just add NS speech synthesizer delegate here. So now I said my application should be a delegate, but this is not enough, of course. I need to implement some things to become a proper delegate, to adopt this protocol in full. First thing I need to do, though, is here, when in our initialization code, so this is something that runs when your application starts, I want to set the delegate to myself. So I will make the speech synth set delegate to self. So what I'm doing here is I created from my application this speech synthesizer, and now I'm saying your delegate is me. I am your delegate, and I will do something on your behalf. In this example, I will override your function, and I will get to know when you're done speaking. Okay. So now I want to actually do that, and let's remove the assistant editor for now. There is a method in speech synthesizer called didFinishSpeaking, and it will tell us if the synthesizer finished speaking or not. And make it like this. Speech synthesizer NS speech synthesizer sender. We can have an autocomplete because Xcode knows that we're adopting this protocol. Finished speaking. And this is basically the place, the code that is going to run when the synthesizer finished speaking. And let's say I want to empty my text field when I finish speaking because, well, we said that and we want the text field to be empty. So I make the text field set string value to just empty string. So I said to my application, create a speech synthesizer, and I said to the speech synthesizer, make me your delegate, and then I had this method. When speech synthesizer finished speaking, it's not going to do something on its own, it's going to ask me to do it because I'm its delegate. When I say I mean my application, of course. So let's run and see what happens. Hello and goodbye, world.
Hello and goodbye, world.
And you see when it finished speaking, the text field became empty. So it works. I hope you understand this is not just something simple that we made this disappear. We made our application to do something on behalf of another object. And this is really powerful thing because instead of doing something complicated, we already have this action somewhere else. We have this in the speech synthesizer. And instead of doing complicated connections, we just said, well, I'm going to react on that. I'm going to work on your behalf, on behalf of that object. So in the next module, let's add few things to our application and see more examples of delegation. Hello and welcome to the last module of this lecture, the longest one, module 4. we're going to see what data source of NS table view is and how to use delegation to make this whole thing work. So what I want to do is to add more voices. I know my operating system comes with a lot of different voices. And the one that we used in the previous module is the default one, is the first one in the list. But there are different voices, and I want the user to be able to select those voices and do something. So I want to create an NS table view. This is just a table, and add more voices to that. But this table by itself is, of course, empty. It has nothing. And we need to create a data source for that table. And to do so, we need to implement a few things. We basically need to implement two methods. First of all, method is called number of rows in the table view. This should return an integer, NS integer, the number of rows in the table. And the next one should get the object from a specific row. And this is the name of that long method. So what we are aiming is this. We'll make our object the data source of the table. So what we are working on, the class itself, the instance of our class when it runs, will be the data source of the table. So we need to implement those two methods and set data source outlet to our instance. And we're going to have a picture like this. So this is our main application. This is what we're working on. And in the view, we have those two buttons, and we have the text field. The buttons have actions, and the target of those actions is our application. They are also outlets. The text field is an outlet, and we are using it to change the text field. So we're not setting the color or color text, but we're changing the string value, and we're getting the string value to send it to the speech synthesizer. The speech synthesizer gets the single method call called speech synth. It's the speak string method, and it delegates one action to our object, to our application. So what we're going to add is an array of voices, and we're going to feed this array into our table view because this application is the data source of our table view. So let's go back to our code, make this header file show up. And first thing I want to create is the array. So this is just a simple NS array called voices. And this array will hold all the voices. Now in our init code here, I want to populate this array basically, and I want to get all the voices from our system. So I can do that because this NS speech synthesizer has a method called available voices, and it returns an array. So I just make this. So now I have voices, and this is list of all the voices, all voice objects. Okay, let's go to my interface and add the table view. I need to make this window a bit bigger and have this like this, table view like this. Oops, sorry. That's good enough. So it's a bit tricky actually. If I click it once, I am going to select the scroll view, because when I put the table view inside, it actually gets put inside the scroll view. So I click again, I get to actual table view. And if I click again, I get to the column view. This is the column of the table. So from the inside, I have to click twice. This is the scroll view, click again, this is the table view. So I only need one column. So here in the utility area, I can change properties for my table view, and I make it one column. It's still cell-based. Cell-based is fine, and I don't want to select columns. So like this. That's all right. So now I want to delegate different things from this NS table view. So if I control click, again, this is the scroll view, so I click again and control click. This is the table view. I have different outlets in this table view already in place. So what I want to do is to make my object, my application, the data source of this NS table view. And I'm going to just make it so. This is the app delegate. This is my application. Make this connection, and I want for my application to be the delegate of this NS table view. And since I want to do something with this table view, I want to react on it, I want to reference it in my code, I'm going to go to my assistant editor and create an outlet for that, just like we did before. So I'm going to control click and go here, create an outlet called I don't know, table view, and this creates an outlet. Okay, so now in my main, if I just run the application now, let's see. I'll make this debug window show up and just run my application. I have a warning. It says must implement this method and this method. So those two methods that I showed you in the slide should be implemented because we delegated from the NS table view. So let's do it. Let's implement those methods. I don't need any of those. This is my main file. So I want to implement first one, NS integer it's called number of rows in table view, and it gets the NS table view. So the number, we know it's the number of elements in our array, and we're just going to return, we're just going to get the same thing like we did here. I'm going to get NS speech synthesizer, available voices, and count, and of course yes. So how many voices is there? It's the number of voices in the speech synthesizer. So here's some expected type. What is wrong here? Oh. Okay, one done, one to go. Another method we need is getting the specific object from a specific row of our table. So this will return the object, and it's called table view. And it's table view TV object value for column, exactly, and we get the autocomplete just fine. And let's create an NS string, and just get it from, we have the voices array, and since this is an array, we have an object at index method, and we get the row, which is right here. This is the integer, the row number. And again, I made a mistake here. I should probably do it like this. Okay, this warning is just says we never use this v, but we're going to use it right now because I want to just return this v. This will return the string from that row. So now we can actually run the application. Hopefully we will see those voices. So we see those voices here. Nothing happens though because we didn't do anything to change the voice, but at least we get the list of the voices in the table. So now I want, since we did this delegate, we can do something on behalf of that table. That table has every row selectable. Here you can see, you can click on the row and you have this blue line because you select that row. This table by itself does nothing when you select it, but we want to delegate that action to my application and do something in my application when the user does that. So let's do it. We have table view selection did change, and in its NS notification. Yep. So first I need to get the integer, the number of the row that is selected. And we can get it because we have the NS view table as an outlet in my code. So I can just create a new NS integer, call it a row, and make it, we have the table view. Why am I doing this mistake all of the time? I have the table view. Did I call it a table view? Maybe I made a mistake. Yeah. Let's see the assistant editor. Yep, I call it table view. And it has a method called selected row. And now here's a oh yeah, here's the error again. It says receiver type NS scroll view for insert messages not declare method with select a selected row. This is because we again didn't click 2 times when we were creating an outlet, because right here you see we created an outlet for NS scroll view, and that because when I was doing this I selected the scroll view. So I should just click twice. Here I see I selected the table view, and I can do it like so. I call it an actual table view, and I don't want this. This is an actual NS table view, and it has selected row method. But I think we have another problem because we have now 2 times synthesizing table view, and I want to delete one of those. And now this should be fine. We created an integer, so this is the number of the row. If by some reason it's not actually selected, nothing happened, then just return, do nothing here. But if it's some number we selected the row, then let's get the NS string and call it selected voice. This is the voice that we're going to get from voices. and get object at that index raw. So now we have selected voice and we just need to set it. So with speech synth has a method called set voice. Oops, set delegate, no. Already did that. Set voice, and of course just pass it the string of selected voice. So what we did, just to recap, we written a method because we are the delegate of an stable view, and we can just write something that happens when that table, some row on that table gets selected. And all we did is we get the integer, the raw number of what's been selected, and we got the voice from the array of voices by that index, and then we set our speech synthesizer to be that voice. So now if I run this application, I will be able to get together.
Get together.
So this is the default voice, and yeah, I should if I select Bruce,
Hello, you.
that's another voice. And if I select, let's Princess,
Hello, you.
that's more of an old lady, but it's fine. There are different voices I can see.
Hello, you.
That works, and that I think is not such a bad example of delegation and how it works. I hope you understood this, because this is essential. The delegation is really important design pattern, and we're going to use it all of the time. So if you have any questions, try to re-watch this lecture, and if you still have questions, feel free to ask any language, basically any way you can ask. But to understand this is really important. So this is not just some stuff you can skip. All right. Well, this was fun. See you in a week. Bye bye.